I just want to see if you were going to talk first, but okay, we're good to go. Anyway, hi, we're back. We're doing it.
Hello.
We're in the next one. I was just thinking about how we didn't even have to do that. I could have just stopped and started again. Had completely two separate files. I just didn't even think about it.
That would make it
Didn't
so much
even-
easier for you, wouldn't it?
Didn't even think about it. Didn't even.
We've been
This is
doing
a
this for like 2
process.
weeks.
This is a process. We're learning. We're in it. We're here. We're doing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Here we are. Indiana Jones is back. We thought he was done. He's not. Here he
I didn't
is.
realize there was a significant break between these two movies.
You didn't? You don't remember when this came out?
No!
This was big when it came out. This came out in the late or early 2010s. Like, this was huge.
This was not really my thing when I was a kid. I mean, my dad is a bit of a movie nerd, but he just kind of like put that on hold when we were little. And it wasn't until like I started getting into superheroes later where I like awoke all the nerdiness.
I mean,
I don't know what's going on with that.
I hadn't seen any of them other than part of the third one, like we said last week. But like when this came out, I was still aware of it, like because it's Indiana Jones. Like I remember the trailers and everything. But anyway, okay, so yeah, you go ahead and start again then with your general reaction and thoughts, since you didn't know there was a massive time gap.
Before anything else, I'm Mac.
I'm Andrew. Yep, good call, good catch, good catch.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Welcome to Movie Whale. That's what we do. Anyway, your thoughts on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Okay, this is going to be a controversial statement.
Oh, don't you dare. Don't you fucking dare.
This is my favorite.
You have got to be kidding me. How? It's easily the worst one.
No, I like this
It's
one
the
a lot.
worst one. Go ahead, explain yourself.
I don't know. It's just, it's fun. It's got, I like the interactions in the beginning. I like the fact, I think the kid character is done pretty well. The moment he said his name was Mutt, I laughed out loud because he did the exact same thing that Indy did. He named himself after a dog.
Did you know he was his kid going in, or was that a twist for you?
I did.
Okay.
Part of the sequence that I had seen previously was the one where they're in the sand and you talk about it. So I was watching it with the lens of like looking for those comparisons and things, and it was kind of fun. I liked that they kind of skipped through like the pop culture in the United States for a time. The moment where they're driving through like the anti-Soviet, anti-communism like rally,
protest,
and all of the signs are hitting the Russian guys in the face. So funny.
Pretty good.
I think some of the interactions that Indy has with Mutt after finding out are a little too scripted. They feel a little funky, but I'm not bothered by it. I like the small little Easter egg with the Ark in the beginning because I wondered when they walked into all those boxes if it was the same place. I like Cate Blanchett's character a lot. I think she's interesting. She's very severe and a little bit one-dimensional, but I feel like that works because most of the time he's having serious problems with the leading lady in the film, and in this one she was just a villain, and I liked that.
That's fair. That's a good point. I had not considered that.
I like the action sequences in this one. The only one I felt went a little too long is when they start going down the waterfalls. I was like, I'm kind of done. But I don't know. The alien thing, okay, it is weird to me that my favorite Indiana Jones is an alien twist. I would have preferred it to have been an archaeological, like, human thing, but I don't hate it, so it doesn't change the fact that it's my favorite.
Right. Okay. Well, God.
I know. I disappoint so many people.
No. Well, I want to give you a brief history, which also helps explain my thoughts on it. Because, so when this came out, at first, it was like Phantom Menace. People were so excited that it was back. Like, how cool is this going to be? Let's do it. Cate Blanchett. Ooh. When it finally came out, people saw it, pissed. They hated it. It was so awful. What I recall was people were mad about the alien twist. They didn't love some of the story elements and blah 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 blah. But I think a big complaint, and I do think one that's mostly fair, is as we've kind of discussed in the previous films were pioneers in practical effects. This went full-blown George Lucas prequel Star Wars CGI, and it is noticeable. The monkeys, the jungle drive sequence, the waterfalls, all of it, like, there are some practical effects, but it's not nearly the same, and not nearly to the same degree. So that's always unfortunate when your film series is known for something so impressive, and then you just completely abandon it.
This might be worth something. This might be worth putting on the table, like, right now. I watched Doctor Who in high school, and I now have a complete blind eye to bad special effects. Like, I can notice them when they're happening, but they don't always disrupt the illusion for me. Same. Because I've gotten really good at filling in the gaps, like, just mentally. I did notice that this had some weird special effects going on with it. I wasn't crazy about that, but it didn't end up registering really for me, because I've seen such worse.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because, like, for the time, it's not the worst, but it's definitely not as good as it could have been. The prairie dogs again are like noticeably CG, and this is from a director who's also known for Jurassic Park, which was 1993, and their special effects still hold up today. And that's the first one that did it, the CGI. So, like, it was kind of weird and disappointing that it was like, really? 20 years later, and you didn't pull out all the stops for this?
And it looks worse. Like, that's not great. Yeah.
A lot of people didn't like Cate Blanchett's character, and I am in that boat. I think, like you said, she's one-dimensional. I don't think the accent is consistent. And I just find her, I don't even find her as interesting as Bollock. Or is it Moloch or Bollock? Bollock?
Which movie?
The first one.
Simply because MAL means bad.
Bollock?
And a lot of, like, Maleficent villains, that's...
Whatever. But, like, him and even, like, the Temple of Doom villain, I don't know, I find them... She has more screen time, I think, probably than both those characters, but, like, we know nothing about her. She doesn't get to do anything until the jungle drive sequence, and that sequence, I think, doesn't make any sense, because of the 3 cars in the sequence, our good guys are in control of 2, and they don't really need to keep driving. They could both just stop.
Yeah, I had a question a couple times. I was like, why are you still driving?
Because, like,
just put on the brakes.
They clearly show he's figuring out where to go when little Jones flips the table. They don't know where they're going. They don't have a destination like the previous drive sequences, like on the tanks and stuff in the other movies. It just feels like, what is happening? Where are we going? And why? It's just, I don't know. I don't like that sequence at all. It just, like, until the very end with the ants. Because, like, Indiana Jones movies are kind of horrific, and it was cool to see that. But wait, what else you got?
I got so used to the Indiana Jones action sequences making minimal amount of sense and just being shenanigans, so I didn't even register the fact that they weren't really going anywhere. I was like, this is just another 30-minute long action sequence, and I actually had fun with it. Like, it makes little sense, but most of them make little sense. The fencing was funny, especially since it was referenced earlier. The fact that he's being like coached through it by his mom, like,
that was good.
That's funny. The monkey thing is a little weird. I thought when I first saw that, I thought he was gonna develop a fear of monkeys in the same way that Indy has a fear of snakes, because monkeys are not friendly. Okay,
I mean,
like, you gotta watch out for the capuchin.
Yeah, at this point, he should have a fear of bugs for sure. Because
those ants are terrifying. I have seen a bullet ant in real life. They are actually that big.
Damn.
Yeah. They're not red like that, or at least the one I didn't see was, but they're like it looked like a bullet. It looked like it was carved out of metal.
Ugh.
Like, yeah.
Okay, pass. So yeah, okay, but, like, again, what other people hated, and what you mentioned you don't mind as much, is the alien twist. And I, at first, when I first, because this is the first Indiana Jones movie I saw all the way through back in the day. And at first I was like, okay, yeah, that's weird. But then having watched them all, I do think it's really cool on paper, because what these films have done have kind of insinuated that all ancient cultures' gods, in one way or another, were real. They just aren't all the same thing. Because as we mentioned in the first episode, the gold idol in the very beginning, its eyes move. So like all of these different, all these different past things, their gods are all real in different ways. And I do think that's kind of fun to explore that, like, yeah, the biblical God, he existed in one way or another. Some of these other ones existed, and so these ones also existed, but like maybe they aren't exactly all gods in the way we think of them. It's a little History Channel and a little Ancient Aliens, but like I think it fits within the rules these movies have set up, and I don't think anything is outlandish after you start with a portal to heaven. Anything after that is believable.
And you gotta be honest, like, it never actually goes so far as to confirm the actual beliefs about the item. It's just that the item has a power. And that is unexplained in most of the film. Like, I can't think of anything that has been like, we know that the Ark is a portal to heaven directly. Rather, what we know is the Ark is extremely dangerous, and when you open it, you're gonna die.
Right. So, and something comes out of it. We don't exactly know what. So that's a good point. A lot of people hated that, though. The alien thing. Which technically they're not aliens, but I don't find that to be as egregious.
Being, that's weird.
It is weird. I don't hate that as much as a lot of people do. But like as a whole though, I don't find this one as fun. I don't find it as interesting. We don't get our adventure and a half, like you mentioned last week. We open up already in this adventure, and I just feel like I don't mind opening up into the current adventure, but I do feel like it takes forever to get started. Like it just.
I gotta say, I think you still get your adventure and a half in this movie. It's more connected than it normally is. We like start with like shenanigans that are just kind of like in the United States, and then we get pulled into things.
I would softly argue against it, because the guys that end up kicking off the adventure on the campus, they're the same guys. It's all the KGB. It's all the same thing.
You're right.
Now, the adventure and a half is where they were first, and we don't see that they were out doing Mexico stuff just for whatever reason. There could have been a fun little opening there. There's nothing. So we spend the first 5-7 minutes of them just walking around and throwing gunpowder up in the air until he goes through the drive in the warehouse. And then there's the whole nuke thing, which is like, it's kind of fun. It's a little weird.
There's no way he survived that. No. I mean, there's so many things that he wouldn't have survived in these movies, but I mean, putting yourself in a fridge and then getting yeeted miles across the landscape, and then when you stand up, the mushroom cloud is like right this there. Close to you. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you know the little Fallout guy. The reason his thumb is up is because you got to put your thumb out, and then if your thumb covers the mushroom cloud, you're safe. Yeah. Dude was not safe.
I had forgotten from the last time I watched it how far he had walked away from the test site. So I thought a really cool thing he could have done is throw that rocket thing off the track and reignite it. And so have him like driving away really super, super fast while the cloud is like behind him. And that's the way he gets away. But like he walks away from it, so it doesn't make any sense and blah, 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 blah. But I know I've seen other YouTube movie people, and you kind of mentioned it. It's cool to bring in the stuff of the era. The nuclear tests, the greasers, all that stuff. Like,
I like that stuff.
Yeah, like it's cool that they did that, but it does create weird, unnecessary nerd arguments about whether or not he could survive in a refrigerator when it doesn't do anything for the movie. You didn't have to include that, and now we're in this weird.
Okay, no, you can't apply that logic to Indiana Jones, or you have to start tearing all of the movies apart. They don't do things because they should or it makes sense for the story. They do things because it will look fun on camera, and it's a part of the adventure.
Which is fair. I do feel like sometimes they maybe don't help the story, but they help tell us something about the character. And at this point, all that tells us is that he's resourceful. We've already seen that. We've seen that a lot.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, the action sequences are super long, and the reason they're long is because they're just having fun with the action sequences. We don't learn anything new
I
the
guess
15th minute into the action
It's
sequence.
so funny though that you're going to bat and defending the worst one. It's taken 3 movies to finally break you into Indiana Jones.
I think if I watch back the first one, I still don't think I like it, even though it's like the same 2 characters. It's the dynamic is different. The characters all have different pulls and relationships to each other, and it's not just like this weird hate or like trying to ignore each other or like
Angst.
like the selfishness, angst stuff.
Arrogance.
I'm not into it. Like, you know, I like it when characters have relationships with other characters in the sense that they feel obligated or close to or connected to in some way to those characters, because that makes things more interesting.
And that's true. That's why the third one's my favorite.
This one has it.
But see, I guess, okay, part of it, I don't like his son. I don't think for one, I'm not a big Shia LaBeouf fan. I think he does fine with what he's given. I don't think he's given a whole lot of good stuff to work with. I don't find their dynamic very interesting. It feels like Indiana Jones dealing with a character that's just kind of annoying, and also just Shia LaBeouf. Like, he's kind of that in everything I know of him in. He's that in iRobot. He's that in the Transformers movies. He's just kind of this awkward punk who's not got a heart of gold, but maybe one of bronze. Like, I don't find him very interesting. I don't want to talk about it.
Super intriguing, but he definitely works as a foil for Indiana Jones.
I think
because he's as dumb as Indy was at the beginning, and we never really get like full on youthful young Indy, but I get the sense that like Indiana Jones is watching his son, especially once he knows that he's his kid. And in that scene where they're driving the cars, they have intentional moments where they like parallel or mark each other. Like the moment when his son is sitting backward in the car and he's driving, that's intentional camera mirroring. You are supposed to see the similarities in the two of them. Like, I don't know. I find that at least a little interesting. I won't argue that he's the most interesting character, but I think it works in terms of highlighting aspects of Indy's character.
Fair enough. And I will have to try to reflect on my just overall dislike of Shia LaBeouf, and maybe that's influencing it. Though I will say your point about him being a foil for Jones, they do something very similar in the next movie, and I think they do it way better, and that might be why I don't like this one. So we'll have to revisit it, because it's not him. There's a different character that just feels more like this is what Jones's kid would be like if they went down a different path, and it just feels more believable. Plus their chemistry was a lot better. So I don't know, but that's for next week, and we won't worry about that right now. But like beyond that, I feel like, yes, these movies are supposed to have fun, silly action sequences, and I think the action sequences for the most part keep up. The one in the warehouse is fun. The escaping the nuke, while silly, is fun. The jungle drive, back and forth. Like the fight with the first weirdos in the ruins, kind of cool. When he blows the dart into his mouth, that's pretty great. That's funny. And the guy's like, "You're a teacher." My favorite one, I think, is the one that starts in the bar that goes through the campus on the motorcycle.
Yeah,
that one is
I like
great.
that too.
Because when they slide under the desks and he just bumps into a student who's like asking him questions about school, that's so good. And then a joke like
you know how nerdy I am.
Go on. Did you know what he was talking about?
No, I didn't know, but I wanted to know, so I looked it up.
Oh, good lord.
It's really interesting.
I'm sure it is. Why wouldn't you? Of course, you're gonna trust Dr. Jones. But again, so like my issue though is like, regardless. Look, what?
And it connects to the end of the film.
Does it?
It's talking about how different cultures end up doing the same thing, and that's a major component in alien theory.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
See, okay, so here's something that I've hoped you'd pick up on a little bit, because I think your critiques of these films as a whole are completely valid and totally fair. However, there is a very, very, very low bar when it comes to the amount of substance in movies. And these movies, I don't think even come close to how low it can be. There is a certain amount of substance. Of course. I think there is more substance to these than there are. I'm not saying this is close to like, I don't know, 12 Angry Men or Citizen Kane or some of the best Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Right.
But like, it's not Sharknado. And not only is there, I think, a little bit of substance, there's still a certain amount of, not mastery, but attention to detail in how they're structured. And the first three are structured, I think, fairly well. I do not think this one is structured as well because I think the highs are not as high, the lows are lower and longer, and they don't make as much sense. There's a not huge, but a noticeable part and sequence where Indy is being grilled by FBI agents because his current buddy partner turns out to be a communist, supposedly. He's not, he's a traitor, he's just in it for the money, whatever. But they're like invested in him. They even go through his office and cause so much issues at work that he ends up being fired. And then they never show up again. At all. Whereas in the previous films, their involvement of all these different secret societies or government agencies, the FBI would have been involved the whole time, and they could have even ended up being some sort of cavalry agent.
Or at the very least, they would have shown up like the guy who was protecting the Grail did.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. All these characters and things that are following Indy and who are involved with him, the Germans follow him, the Russians follow him, the FBI, who's like kind of pissed and into this, don't care at all after they search his office. After they search his office, they totally give up. And it's just, this is a thing.
To be fair, it would have been pretty far out of their jurisdiction to be in Peru.
When would the American government give a shit about that? In the 80s. Wait, this is the 50s. In the 50s! It's just, I'm just saying there are things that I don't think are as blatantly confusing in the previous movies are in this movie. I love that Marion comes back. I think that's great. I do think they're being, let's ignore my issues with Shia LaBeouf, a younger character who is very different from Jones being the sidekick character in this instead of someone like Willie or Billy or whatever her name was in the second one, or Dr. Schneider, Willie. Like, yeah, that's all good and fine, and it is kind of fun. It's just the hair thing annoys me. He's constantly combing his hair, and I find it annoying. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. And then like at this point, I'm just rambling. If you got more things you want to say that are positives, I'm all for it. I just feel like it's kind of all over the place in some ways.
I did want to mention this. They bring the shadows back for this one. They use the shadows
several
well.
Times. They do. Yeah, the opening with the hat, and then with the sheet when they're testing the skull on him. I take some issue with the skull too, because the magnetism thing seems to be only if you can see the skull.
I just chalked it up to weird ESP things that they don't bother to explain. Like most of the powers, they don't bother to explain. So,
I mean, true, but like they don't have the powers of the other things all the time throughout the movie, and that got to me a little bit.
They also create pretty strict. Well, no, I take that back. I was going to say they create rules around the items, but that's not actually true because they create rules around the Ark and they create rules around the Grail, but they don't have rules for the Temple of Dune Stones. They just kind of do whatever. And so I think that doesn't really necessarily have a negative impact on this. Although, if we're being honest, the stones don't seem super important to the actual plot of the third one. I mean, they are in the sense that they're like, what is it called? MacGuffin. They have to be there to make it work, but they don't really do anything other than like burn somebody's hand one time.
Yeah.
And the Crystal Skull is way more central to what's happening in the story because of the ESP mind control stuff that's happening.
Which I think that's fine.
I'll give you that. I don't know. I think it works, but the weirdest thing about the ESP is not that it's unexplained. It's that the Cate Blanchett's character in the beginning tries to use ESP on Indiana. That was weird.
That never comes back other than her referencing that's something they want to explore. Like,
exactly.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I will say, I related to her when she stood there and got destroyed by all the information that she was learning. I get it. I probably wouldn't quite do the same thing, but
tempted.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
That was another thing that people were kind of upset about, though, which was this. It's very similar to the ending of the first and third film, and it's easily the lamest. Like, she bursts into flames, but like it's not even as interesting as the first time it happens, and the first one from the 70s or 80s, or the guy who drinks from the wrong grail. Because, I mean, for one, it's CG, and it lasts all of a second and a half. They could have done something really cool and graphic with that, and they shy away from it, it feels like, in this movie. It kind of feels like the teeth are taken out. Because, like, you kind of forget when you go back and watch these movies because of how often people talk about how much they loved them when they were kids. These movies are violent, graphic, and crazy, and this movie just isn't. It doesn't come close to that. And I'm not saying necessarily that it has to be, but it's kind of weird that they decided to stop doing that.
I will give you the effect thing. I hadn't considered that at all watching it, but like thinking back on it, the lack of practical effects, the choice to sort of like go more cerebral with it rather than visual with it is a big departure for the series, and I can see how that would bother people. I will say it does not bother me, but I can definitely see how if you really love the series, this would not align with that for you.
Yeah, I mean, it happened later, but like I just feel like even the extremist soldiers in Iron Man 3 would be a better effect because she's supposed to be like burning from the inside out. And
True.
if she had glowed first, like that movie's not even meant to be like that, Iron Man 3. The extremist soldiers in general are more horrific than what happens to Cate Blanchett at the end, even though she completely dies. And I don't know, I just would have done something different. I can't help but feel very nitpicky about the alien room, for lack of a better word. I can't help it, you know? And I feel like it's unfortunate that you at this point have given up on caring about like the rules or anything 4 movies in.
They're fun. It's just whatever shenanigans is most fun. We're gonna do it. We're gonna throw them off the cliff 3 times in the movie, and it'll be fine.
It's not just like that. In the Grail was put in a place and left there. The Ark of the Covenant was put in a place and left there. The stones aren't hidden anywhere specific. This skull was somehow taken from this alien chamber that can only be opened with a skull, and then they left and somehow put all that back together, put the skull somewhere else, and the adventure, the treasure hunt in this one, I think takes a back seat compared to the last one especially. Because they mention the conquistadors and where they were and what they did and who did what and where this thing is and the significance of this. But it's all like kind of little bits of dialogue surrounded by the character moments between Mutt and Indy or Mutt and Marion or Indy and Marion. And it doesn't feel as national treasure, which I guess it doesn't have to. But it gets to the point where I go into the alien chamber and I've got questions. But by the time I got to the room with the 1,000-year-old knight surrounded by a bunch of gold cups, I didn't have any questions. I understood and knew what was going on. And I just feel like they set up a kind of, there's confusion.
That's interesting.
Where I just don't think there really needs to be. And I just...
So you're saying you liked essentially how grounded the other treasures were in history and or real life, because that made them easy to understand with what you were working with. Whereas they are constantly confused the entire time, and even the end of the movie confirms that you can't understand it, and that's it.
What I think what's worse is they're not confused. Jones is acting as if Jones always acts, and so is Oxley. They understand the situation. They figured out that they're interdimensional beings and blah, blah, blah. But not a single one of the characters even questions, well, how exactly did the skull leave this place? And if they do explore that in the movie, I missed it. Because they talk about how it keeps going back and forth, and who found it here, and who had it this place, and where they found it the first time, and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, how does it...
They talk about...
I'm sorry, I missed a part, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I missed a part in my initial rant. Why do the interdimensional alien beings leave when the skull comes back, as if they were gonna leave, but someone took the skull? But if someone took the skull, they were only able to take it after they separated and maybe died or something. Like there's a certain amount of things we can't know and can't understand, and I get that. But there's also a lot of like why that could easily be answered by Indiana Jones mumbo jumbo, where he just sees scribbles on a wall and reads it and tells us, the audience, that we don't get. There's just this room of dead aliens that are just there for whatever reason.
I go back and forth on this. I would not mind a tiny bit of exposition where he just, like he said, read something on a wall, some mumbo jumbo. That could be interesting. I would like, especially since you get to the hidden temple. You're the only ones who have made it inside in like countless years. And so you actually get to finally read the story and know what happened at this place and why the skull is separated. That's cool. It also is heavy exposition. And I don't necessarily feel like we need heavy exposition at that point in time. That said, it would totally be in spirit of Indiana Jones. So I might lean slightly more exposition than not. But I don't know that I need all those things answered for me to enjoy this story.
Checkmate. 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 Before Cate Blanchett blows up, we see in her, she sees the answers. No exposition. We see it. We see them coming and making and influencing all the people and blah, 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 blah. And whatever reason why they stay and die and who takes the first skull. You could answer every single question with that weird mental sequence thing.
You're saying you would put in a tiny little montage.
Yes. And that's part of the vision she gets before she gets too much information, is overloaded, and then dies.
It would also explain why they essentially punish her for asking for the knowledge. Be like, you're just one of those greedy humans that trapped us here. Yeah,
that's
that
the thing.
Be cool. I like that.
That's the thing, though. You're interpreting it as they were trapped. I'm interpreting it as they stayed because there's nothing keeping them there. So, like, what? That's
the skull. They don't have all their parts.
Right, but how did anyone get the skull? How did anyone?
I'm assuming somebody stole it.
But
humans can do that all the time.
How and why? When they can leave whenever they want. Did they die? They clearly didn't die because they come back to life. Why did they separate themselves into 13 beings, which in the artwork, they are 13 whole beings, and then stay in their chamber, lock themselves in, and die? Then someone went in, stole the skull, but they can't get into that chamber without a skull. They then left the chamber and closed it. Like, you see what I mean? Like, all these things.
So, I'm going to be totally honest. I did catch the fact that they're not dead, but they're skeletons. But how do we get the skull if they weren't dead? And why do they look like they're fully flesh in the pictures? With gold spacesuits, by the way, which I feel like we need to talk about because gold is a conductor and you don't want that for a spacesuit. But moving on.
Hey, remember, it's not space. It's the space between spaces.
Well, and that's where I'm going with this. I think they added the interdimensional thing later. I don't think it was always the idea that they would be interdimensional, and therefore when they add that bit, there are some things that just don't make sense. Like, they had already made the set with the flesh aliens, and they're like, well, I guess it's just gonna be that now, and that's a disconnect between what was designed in the special effects computer room and the practical set place. That's my guess.
Well done.
Thank you.
Because Spielberg, one of the two, I think it's Spielberg, he didn't want to make an alien movie, but Lucas did. And so this was the compromise, was to make them interdimensional beings. So
that's weird.
You did catch.
Just go with the aliens.
You caught some behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know. So, like, I'm not going to tell you this can't be your favorite one, but I do think it is the weakest one of the 5.
No, the first one is the one that I don't care about.
See, I was the same way, and I'm curious if, in a couple of years, if you ever do watch them again. I didn't like the first one. I really didn't like the second one. But then upon rewatching them again, I find that it fluctuates. I ended up loving the first one and hating the second one more. Now I don't like the first one, and I love the second one. But this one, for me, I thought it was shit. Then I watched it again, and I was like, you know what? This isn't bad. But then I've watched it again in the context of all of them together, and I'm like, nope, this is bad. This is bad. As a movie, it's fine. It's fun. But as an Indiana Jones movie, I don't think it's that good.
Well, and maybe that's why I like it.
Ugh!
I did consider that.
That's so hateful, so hurtful, so painful.
I'm sorry.
But fair.
I'm not vibing with this guy.
It's so... whatever. Fine. Fine.
Okay, I'm not gonna say that it's like bad in the sense that people shouldn't like it. I'm not
You're not a
connecting.
big Jones
Like,
person. That's fine.
yeah,
That's fair.
I
That's
like a lot of what they do in the movie making part of the film, but for me, I'm about the story and the characters and whether or not I feel invested. And in the first one, I felt like my chain was being yanked around. I was like, I don't know who to care about. I don't know if I even care if this is accomplished. I don't
this
really
is a very
know.
mature approach to Indiana Jones. That's dangerous. I'm a little
I was like,
curious.
I don't know what I'm supposed to care about.
Well, I'm a little curious now as to your approach to some other films that you've been watching that are similar to this. We don't want to talk about this right now, but
Mhm.
that's intriguing. But I am excited now though to watch the last one because it is, I think, maybe either my favorite or my second favorite after the third one.
Okay.
I personally think it gets a lot right. It has a great opening mini adventure that does end up connecting to the later adventure.
Okay.
I mean, I'll have to watch it again, but I do feel like there's a lot of character driven stuff, a lot of
Mhm.
substance, more practical effects, and
That's
the
good.
supernatural element is very different, but still
Mm.
somehow just as believable. I think.
Okay.
So to
Mhm.
cap this little journey off, I think next week will be very interesting.
I haven't heard anything really about that one. Some people were like, "Yeah, it was all right." So hearing you talk about it makes it sound more intriguing. I'm
There,
kind of excited.
it was a combination of things, but like it's kind of hard to tell because the secondary character is a woman, and Indiana Jones has a older male fan base. So
Mhm.
I personally thought it was really good. It was kind of hard to tell what was real criticism and what was just hatefulness. So give it a second view. You give it a first one, and we'll figure it out. But that's next week. I think at this point we're kind of done with the fourth one, unless you have anything
Yeah.
else you want to add. I do think it's cool that they get married. I do like that he takes the hat
Mhm.
out of Mutt's hand because
Mhm.
not yet,
I'm not done
Junior.
with it. You can't
Not
take it
yet.
yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Last point. I think this was the best example of the snake phobia. The last couple, it's like very overwhelming, and it's like a bunch of snakes. This one, it
Uh-huh.
came out of nowhere, but
He
for
needed to
us,
use it to save his
yes. And
life.
for us at this point, we're like,
Mhm.
oh no, not a snake. Like that was
Mhm.
good. I like that a lot. That was funny.
And like the way he like got there, he was like, "Tell me it's a rope. It's a rope."
Yeah, maybe I can touch the ground. It's fine. I can touch the ground. It'll be all right.
Yeah. There's no ground, Indy.
Yeah, good stuff. But all right, that's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Mac's favorite.
Sorry, guys.
I'm gonna cut it there. That'll be the last word. Is sorry, guys.